Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 272. Today I am joined by Anissa Capsales and Mike Pekovich, and we discuss edge grain versus end grain cutting boards, how to up your box making game, issues with brushing on shellac, and wood movement and a solid wood door with a kumiko panel. And Anissa turns up the woodworking dorkiness just a little bit, but let Anissa be Anissa. That's what I always say. Before we get started, I want to let everyone know, especially everyone in Atlanta know, that on August 22nd, Mike will be at Highland Woodworking for a book signing from 3:30 to 5:30. There will be books available. Both of his books will be available for purchase there, and he'll sign them and take a picture and chat a little bit. I'll probably be around as well, but that's less exciting. So head on over to highlandwoodworking.com for more information on that, and maybe we'll see you there. Looking forward to it. All right, on with the show. All right, so let's jump right in. This question is from Michael, and I think this one, there's a firestorm coming. I was talking with a prospective client about making him a cutting board. I confidently recommended end grain when people asked about cutting boards, but he did some research and showed me this video that debunks the idea that end grain is the superior choice. See link below. I'll post it in the show notes. The video is 3 years old, so maybe you've come across it if you haven't. I would love to hear your take on it. There are other interesting points these kitchen professionals make about cutting boards that I think woodworkers would like to know. To sum up the important part of the video, it's an America's Test Kitchen video, and they're doing what they do, testing kitchen equipment. Says it right there in the name of the show.
Yeah.
And
recipes and stuff.
They do recipes. That's what they test them. Yeah. And they went through and tested a mess of cutting boards, commercially bought cutting boards. And one thing that they tested with a robot arm, which is cool. All of a sudden, I want a job that involves a robot arm.
I want to watch the robot arm whacking the cutting boards with the knives.
But they said that there was no appreciable difference in the in between an end grain and an edge grain cutting board in regards to knife sharpness.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I know, Mike, you have pretty strong feelings on this. Do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, I like America's Test Kitchen. I love their, because they don't just do a recipe. They just say, here's how to make the best chili. And they give, some people put peanut butter in it. We tried it. Some people put root beer in it. We tried it. Some people have dried chilies. Doesn't make a difference. It's like, I want to know all of this because I want to make the best chili.
Do people do that with chili?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Peanut butter?
Oh, yeah.
That's a thing. Yeah. And cocoa powder and lots of stuff.
It's actually good. Kevin Coffinger, he was on the back cover and he wrote for us. His wife was the first, but Camille makes a really good chili with peanut butter. It was the first time I heard of it.
Okay.
It's yummy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I love the source. They're very rigorous in their testing and their testing methods. It points to a lot of problems when you're doing any sort of testing. And I really think that, in essence, they were testing something that they really don't know about per se in terms of woodworking. Like, they're not woodworkers.
Okay.
They're professional chefs and food recipe testers who are tasked with figuring out what a good cutting board is. I think that's fine. Like a lot of the criteria, I don't know. They're assuming that every single person has one giant, massive cutting board that they do everything from dicing onions to chopping chicken bones on.
I was thinking that when I was listening to the video.
The other thing is they have no care in the world whatsoever about the materials and where they're sourced and who are making these cutting boards. So, and some of their surprising results were and we found that an end grain cutting board took X amount more oil than a edge grain cutting board, and teak took nothing because it has naturally occurring oils in the wood. It's just yeah, that's wood. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So to say the teak cutting board is the best cutting board because it requires the least amount of oil, it's like, I don't know if that's an interesting criteria. And also end grain, and they say, oh, and end grain is prone to splitting just like you split wood, with an axe. It's like, no. A lot of butchers have been chopping on end grain butcher block cutting boards for a really, really long time. But the main thing is that end grain, the fibers are going up. So when you're slicing, you're really parting fibers as you slice. So it's sort of a self-healing surface where if you're slicing across an edge grain board, you're slicing across the fibers, leaving score marks. And the other thing is that
that increases the longevity of the board. Right?
The end grain?
Yeah.
And they also say that the slicing end grain sharpens the blade because it actually straightens the burr on the edge of the blade as you slice. I think that's why people say that the end grain keeps a knife sharper. So it's like, and then just getting back to, so if you are a Crate and Barrel or Williams-Sonoma shopper and no woodworkers who make custom boards and you really don't care, and these 5 boards are things you're going to be able to find in a store and online, it's okay, but I would still, because wood can tend to be sort of like a local material, I think the source and material is important. And I think who's making the board, if you can control it, is really important too. So, and then that being said, there's also this issue, like when we test clamps, and this clamp, rated at 14 million pounds, where this one only rated at 10 million pounds, when it's like, yeah, but is that difference, does that mean anything?
Yeah. Do you only need 6 million pounds?
Yeah. That, and then they show the end grain where all these pieces were like separating and coming apart. And it's just like, what are you doing to your cutting board? You better not be putting this in the dishwasher. You better not be fully submerging this board. You better be washing the surface and drying it immediately, because no cutting board in its properly maintained will ever look like that. So to say that, this one, edge grain board, it's split between one of the boards, and this end grain board, it showed these sort of gaps between the squares. That's just board abuse. That's just so, so there's all these things where, and I'm sure their recommendation is fine, but I also don't think that it negates the notion that someone making an end grain cutting board, especially like a really cool, visually appealing end grain board with the kind of optical illusion, or the checkerboards, or Anissa brought something in really cool. I'm glad she did. That's a really great thing. And the other thing is, it's like, maybe in a professional chef's kitchen, you have one massive board. I counted, I don't know, I'm like 7 or 8 cutting boards.
Jeez.
Same.
I have 2 pull-out boards.
We have 2.
Yeah, it's like we have like one pull-out cutting board is for veggies only. The other pull-out cutting board is for like bread and bagels and that kind of stuff. And we got the cutting board for the sliced cheese and crackers to present at the party. You got the cutting board for a loaf of bread at the dinner table.
Cutting board for just the onions and garlic. Because if you cut an apple on the cutting board that had the onions and garlic, it just sucks no matter how much you wash it.
Or the everything bagel is an offender as well.
Separate cutting board for that. You said
off air.
Was it off air? I'm so sorry.
And then I've got 2 different plastic cutting boards for cutting meats, just because my wife is a vegetarian and I'm super sensitive about where meat things are going. And you can say wood is antibacterial and all that good kind of stuff, but I just choose to cut my meats on hard plastic cutting boards. So, it's like the thing is trying to find, one size fits all. And they did speak to user experience, which is, and I think 100% true. I mean, if your user experience is enhanced by working on a really beautiful cutting board, that's great. And here's another thing. If you make a really nice cutting board for someone, they're never going to use it.
What is with that?
They just don't. And I got a call from a person that I had sold a cutting board to like 5 years ago, and they say it's really, really damaged. Can you fix it? I thought, oh no, all the glue seams are popping apart. What's going on? And it turns out like the dad was slicing a frozen bagel and just put a deeper knife mark going across it. And it's like,
that's a cutting board.
That's the nature. Yeah, but we don't. So I didn't ask any questions. I ran it back through my planer, put a new coat of oil on it, gave it back. Oh, that's beautiful. And some people, I will go to their kitchens and the cutting board will sort of be leaning up against the backsplash on the wall. Yeah. And so I said, just grab that one. We don't use that one. So, levels of use, I think, is an issue too.
Well, okay. So I had posted the video to the website and I used the head, what cooks want you to know about cutting boards or something like that, because there was a wealth of information in the video about thickness of the cutting board, how it affects them at the cutting bench, right. The niceties of having hand finger holds routed in the side so you can flip it over without it having to have feet on it. They don't like them with feet because you can't flip it over and use it that way. Right. There was a lot of information in there. And just like their video was certainly not about like edge grain versus end grain cutting boards. But of the 10 I'm
a woodworker. That's all I listen to. Whoa, wait a minute right there. Stop this video.
But that was the point of it, is like that there's probably more to making a good cutting board than an end grain cutting board versus an edge grain cutting board. But I actually did wander around looking for information about end grain cutting boards being better for knives or better for cutting. And the first 2 pages of Google was entirely filled with woodworkers talking about cutting boards. And eventually I wound up on Reddit, on like the knife sharpening subreddit. Yeah. And it was intense, but them debating about end grain versus blah, blah, blah. And the knife sharpening people were all like, oh no, I use a rubber cutting board or something. It was like, they're like, what are you using wood for? So it was like a little too far in that extreme probably. But I had always thought that an edge grain cutting board was just going to wreck your knife. It was going to look tore up in 2 days and that's it. And after watching this video, I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe next time we need a cutting board, I'll just make an edge grain cutting board because I don't really want to make an end grain cutting board. That's a lot of work. And another thing that they said in the video was like, it takes a really skilled craftsperson to make an end grain cutting board that's not going to come apart. And it was like, well, yeah. It requires effort and thought and you're not just going to walk in off the street. First thing I make is going to be a end grain cutting board and it's going to last forever. So I think it just goes to speak for what you were saying. You don't know the cabinet maker making the cutting board. You don't know that, but then maybe you need to buy a cutting board from Teak House or whatever they say. But if you buy a Jonathan Brower cutting board,
my prop.
And Anissa has. And
it's a good thing I'm such a slacker because I should have mailed this back to Jonathan Brower like 2 years ago. But so I have Jonathan's gorgeous end grain mosaic cutting board.
It's sort of like a chaotic mosaic board. And it looks random, but random is really hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But he had a really smart way to go about that.
The first time I saw it, I could not think my way. Normally I can think my way through processes. Yes. Couldn't do it with this one.
No, this came in. One of the editors on the staff was like, do we do cutting boards? It's like, dang, we're doing that cutting
board. So that was what? That was $294. And one of the best parts of that shoot was he's doing this cutting board, he's building this thing, and the first step is all on sticks that he's running through the planer and the table saw and the jointer like we normally do. And when he started cutting it up or gluing it together and then cutting it up and re-gluing it and walking over from gluing up to go to the jointer with the end grain up and the planer with the end grain up. And then he took it to the table saw and initially I was like, wait a second, you're cross cutting against the rip fence. And I was just like, what?
He's breaking all the rules.
You can't do
end
that.
grain over a joiner.
Right. And I was just like, what are you doing? And he looked at me and he said, Anissa, it's only wood. And I was like, okay. But then we talked about the table saw setup too. And actually that the way it's set up and the way he's cutting, it really is a rip cut.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like he's not doing anything terrible there. And he's not doing anything terrible on the planer or the jointer either.
So you run an end grain through the planer?
Well, there are people who say, I say, you can't run end grain across the joiner because the back end is going to blow out. And then people say, no, you can run end grain across the joiner, although sometimes the back edge blows out. So it's like,
okay, yeah,
keep it extra large and just cut it off later.
We're all in agreement.
Let's just think of it as snipe.
But it is an amazing spectacle to see it done and go, oh, that's cool. I don't know if I want to try it, but that's really cool. And then through the planer, I guess with the spiral cutter head. Did he do anything on the back? Did he leave it long and have to get rid of chip out? I don't remember if he talked about it or addressed that.
Oh, geez, I don't remember either. I think the nature of the whole thing was just constantly being cut and recut and glued and re-glued. And I think he just tackled that all at the end, if there was any of it.
That was a description of all woodworking.
Pretty much. But then, go ahead.
Oh, I've jointed like the end of a door frame on a joiner.
Oh, yeah,
so
I've
like
done that too.
The stiles that are end grain down, and there you just go in a couple inches to hit that end grain stile. Then you flip it around and go all the way across. I guess you could do the same thing on the joiner, not the planer. The planer's going to go all the way through, but I'm sure there's a lot of people listening who have far more experience doing this.
Yeah,
I could use a refresher because everything I've heard about the right way to do it, I've kind of forgotten.
No, there's people who that's what they do. End grain cutting boards, and I think the interesting part of it was the other aspects too. Like there's it shouldn't be surprising how chefs are very particular about their tools.
Yes.
Their knives. We know chefs are very particular about knives.
Yes.
Well, why wouldn't they be particular about cutting boards too?
Yeah.
And they probably need to be able to go and buy one at the store, at the mall.
I think that's why I like the video so much. It's not that I agreed with all the content, but I liked the video production. I thought she was great. She was right on with her delivery and just her demeanor. But I like the video for the dork value appealed to me because I loved hearing the way they tested them and everything that went into the testing. I really appreciated it. There were a couple things, like Mike said, where they went to an expert to talk to them about the end grain versus the long grain. Does that expert woodwork or does that expert just know about wood? Because there's a difference between a forestry person and a woodworker. Ideally, it would be a forestry person who does woodworking, but I don't know. And there were a couple other little nitpicky things like that, but I thought the video was great. Perfect length.
And I mean, fact of the matter is they're testing Toyota Camrys of cutting boards. And hopefully everyone listening to this show are making BMWs of cutting boards or whatever. It's a different level. They're testing $100 cutting boards, and you charge more than $100 for a cutting board.
I've made my last cutting board forever.
Really?
Yes.
Was it the one that
Yes.
Oh, that doesn't get used, by the way.
I was out of the cutting board business, but it's one of those things you're never out because there's always someone that needs a wedding gift or housewarming gift or something. And they remember that cutting board you made for them 10 years ago. And it was like, it was it was the daughter of a client who's a friend of ours. And it was just like, so she really, really wants one. I said, no, I don't make them. And then they get in contact with, I really, they're so great. I love mine. Can you make one? I say, no, I can't. Please, just for this thing, and it's like, fine. I think it said $250, which is, I've never sold a cutting board for that much. I just wanted them. And I also recommended other cutting board brands, go buy this one or go buy, no, I really like yours. So, okay. And then I kind of felt bad for charging them a lot. So I wanted to do them something really special other than an edge grain cutting board. So I did my first end grain cutting board, slicing it up, flipping the blocks, putting it back together. I thought it was beautiful. And I thought it was like above and beyond. And so I gave that to them. I said, here you go. They're like, no, we just wanted like the one that you gave us. And I said, well, I'm sorry, you can go buy one. I won't charge you for this one. Like, we're done. And they're like, well, you can just sell this one and make me another one. And it's just like, oh. And then Anissa was going to a wedding or something for your friend. Wedding. And so
about the cutting board.
Like for pennies on the dollar, here you go. Here you go. And anyway, this is how horrible of a negotiator and business person I am. I actually agreed to then make a second cutting board for them in the edge grain. Here you go. And by the way, you have just deprived the world in all the future to come of ever owning a cutting board made by me because I will never make a cutting board. So I think there are two types of woodworkers who make cutting boards and woodworkers who don't. But they're wonderful, depending on what you're doing. They're easy to make. It's a great price point to sell at craft shows and stuff. And really, it's a great price point for someone who really appreciates handmade furniture. And they can't spend $2,000 on a side table, but you can spend $75 on a cutting board and feel like you're getting that same access to that same quality. And it does affect their quality of life when they're in the kitchen. So it's a really good thing and a really good service to offer for woodworkers. And it is one of the very few things other than people who can crank stuff out really quick, where you're able to sell something at a low enough price point to get it in a craft store or sell it at a craft fair.
Speaking of which, we have a series coming out soon. Adam Godet talking about how to sell at craft shows and craft fairs and what to make and what to think about. And, don't forget tablecloths and blah, blah, blah. It's a series of 6 blogs coming up. And there'll probably be the first one or two will probably be coming out around this episode. So I'm pretty psyched about that one.
That's very
There's
cool.
a lot of really good insights.
Yeah, that's cool.
He's a good person to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Anissa, you worked with a furniture maker who did really high-end commercial work, and they would just take their offcuts, cut them small, sand the edges, and then just sell them as cutting boards. Like at craft fairs. And I remember going to a craft fair and seeing their work. And they did not represent themselves as a high-end furniture maker, which they were and did excellent work.
Right.
I just make cutting boards. Here's my cutting boards.
Right. I think it was like a different arm of her setup.
Yeah. So I thought that was very, very smart marketing.
Yeah.
And,
it totally is.
Was it on a different label almost?
I'd have to check.
I think that her commercial clients had no idea she sold cutting boards, and the cutting board clients had no idea she made high-end commercial furniture.
It's interesting. That's a good way of doing it.
It really is. I mean, there are cosmetic companies, like a bunch of different companies that have a lower end kind of product, and then a mid-range, and then a really high-end product.
Yeah. Cool. All right, let's jump to... Should we do the Kumiko one? Because that'll be quicker.
I don't remember that one.
Okay.
Can I just leave for that one? Because I have nothing to say about it.
Well, it's
like that's a question
style.
for Mike.
Wow.
Yeah,
and only Mike.
Sometimes they are.
I know.
Nobody cares about us. Actually, no. There's like a pile of ukulele questions that I can't answer I just need to tell people, like, I'm not answering ukulele questions because I'm figuring it out myself. All right. This next question is from, I believe it would be pronounced Yarmo in Germany. I am working on the design of a Krenov-style wall cabinet, and I would like to include kumiko panels in the solid wood door. How should I attach the kumiko and deal with wood movement? The door would be 14 inches wide with a 6x6 kumiko panel in the middle. Is the panel small enough that I could just glue it in, or should I use some kind of frame to make it float inside its opening? Any other ideas? So 14-inch wide door. That's going to move, right?
Yeah, I mean, either or. I don't think that movement over 6 inches is huge. You could tack the panel in place if you wanted to do a frame like around it and have it float inside like a mitered frame, basically mitered stops front and back that was still inset into that 6-inch opening. That would work. But Anissa, being more of the expert on Krenov style furniture, another way would be to just create a veneered door. Because a lot of the panels in Krenov work, it was all shop made.
Oh, veneer. Yeah. And that would eliminate the movement.
Yeah. And keep it nice and flat over a period. Because any 14-inch wide slab door, it's not only going to move side to side, you may get some cupping or twisting over time as well. So.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I shouldn't have been so dismissive at the word kumiko. You should not have.
Yeah. You skipped over the Krenov.
So there was an element to your answer, though, that I think you just like blazed right past that spoke to me. You said, I'm not worried about that much movement over 6 inches, because you're not worried, even though it's a 14-inch wide door, you're not factoring in the movement of a 14-inch wide door. You're factoring in the movement of that door over the width of the kumiko panel, which would be 6 inches wide.
Yeah, my brain only calculates movement as it regards to quarter sawn white oak, which is really minimal. Which is not. And the panel itself is, it could be somewhat compressive or forgiving. So you might have a really slight gap side to side if it expands. And if it shrinks, it's just going to be stuck in there really tight. I don't think you're going to break it. So yeah, I think that's okay.
Interesting. That was a lot simpler of an answer than I was expecting.
Can I go back to the cutting boards for a second? So one of the things that they were talking about, you didn't say no, so I'm just going to run. The teak cutting board was their all over favorite.
Yeah.
And I think she said that it was the easiest on the knives. Am I mistaken, or was she just talking about it felt the best as they were cutting?
Well, there is that element to it that we didn't talk about, because there are people who think that end grain cutting boards feel better under a knife. And there are people, I did see that on Reddit, who thought end grain cutting boards are too soft under the knife or too sticky under the knife.
But then
there's
like that. Other tropical hardwoods, which are known for having a high silica content in the wood, which dulls
that's what I'm
plain
getting
irons
at.
and cutting blades.
So wouldn't it dull the kitchen knives?
I don't know.
Does teak have high silica content?
I don't. Okay. I mean, gluing teak can be a problem. So are you using nasty epoxies? And also, I went on the site because I really wanted to know where the boards were made. All they said it was internationally certified, renewable source for the wood, which is cool. But again, it's like if you found a woodworker and say, make me a teak cutting board, they're probably going to spend $100 for that teak in order to make you the cutting board. And so,
oh no, I bet you Teak House or whatever is dumpster diving in deck board mills or something. Like they're able to use cutoffs.
I assume they're
grain,
sourcing it from the source overseas. It's being made where the teak is probably being harvested or close to that.
I would just think there's so much teak milled up for boat work and for decking and all of that the offcuts from that manufacturing could probably provide a cutting board manufacturer.
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
I did not mean to say that Teak House is literally dumpster diving.
I think you did. I think you literally said, do you want your next cutting board to come from a dumpster? Well, if you do, this podcast brought to you by...
I'm so sorry.
That's twice. I gotta bleep two things out of Anissa.
I'm sorry.
That goes right over my head. I guess I'm used to it. That's sad.
Let's take a break. There's a reason why Pony Jorgensen is tight with woodworkers. Their clamps are made using only the highest quality of materials, and they inspect each one to guarantee consistency and performance. That's what they mean when they say clamps without compromise. Head on over to ponyjorgensen.com to explore their wide range of pipe clamp fixtures, bar clamps, hand clamps, and more. And join their woodworking community on Instagram by following them at pony_Jorgensen. I have been doing marquetry, something I never thought I'd do, but I had an idea for a thing, for a headstock ornament, if you will, on a ukulele. And
chicken. You're doing a marquetry chicken.
I am not doing a marquetry chicken, but if I ever do, I'm going to give it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think he's doing? Marquetry what?
He knows, I bet.
Oh, crud. Please see how I didn't say the other thing.
Sorry
for that interruption, Ben.
I'm doing he's not, why am I like secretive about it? He's not listening to a woodworking podcast. I'm making a ukulele for a friend. It was somewhat commissioned, not for money though. Requested that I make it by his wife. And sadly, she has since passed on. So now this project has taken on a lot of weight. And I am sitting there going, what would Lori want on this? And I had the idea for, there was a rose from one of his album covers that she did the art direction on. And so I wanted that rose on the headstock. And it's not going to be just it's going to bleed off the headstock, and hopefully it looks cool. But so all of a sudden I was like, okay, how do I do that? And I thought about using Aspen Golan's airbrushing technique, her stencil airbrushing thing, and which is super awesome. And then I thought, maybe because the picture is a grayscale, is black and white, I thought maybe that would be cool as a grayscale marquetry piece. So I've been doing that. I've been using Chelsea Van Voors's blogs as a guide. And like the thing that she does that's so cool is, she's able to do it on her kitchen table. She's using just like, cutting mat that like a sewist would use, and a snap blade knife and her imagination, and she does art panels a lot, so it's a super fun way for her to, quickly make something and be expressive. That's not something I'm good at. Like the whole art end is not a strong suit for me. So this is a new world for me. And one thing that's super fun about it is when you realize that like nobody is going to look at the photograph and compare the two. And if this petal does not overlap right next to the other petal, and it's like, so it's like, it's different to be in a world where it's like, oh, I cut this thing and it's a little weird. Well, I'm just going to round it off and make the next piece fit that one. And I'm really having a blast with it.
It's nice. It takes the pressure off, especially such a meaningful piece that you're doing.
Yeah. It takes the pressure off though, like you said, and it just makes it, going from one extreme where it's like, I'm measuring 1.7 millimeters for this piece to, oh, okay, I cut that. Well, that's fine. I'll make the next piece fit. And I always looked at marquetry as really precise and really difficult and really hard. I just said the same thing twice. But like this method is not, it's a very skillful act still, but it's not, it's like you make the mistake slowly. It is not like this one and done moment of like, well, that turned out like crap. It is, that piece didn't work. Well, throw that piece on the floor. Do it again. Throw it on the floor. Do it again. Or make it fit with the other one. And it's just, a lot of fun. And so Chelsea Van Voorse's blogs on veneering, and I think we're calling it like apartment veneering or whatever, but it's I'll link to them.
Those are awesome. I mean, it really demystifies the process.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can do this, and then you do it. And it's like, I can do this.
Yeah. I think a lot of it, a lot of the success is contingent upon like picking a good thing to do. I went out, I read some of her blogs, and I was like, I'm buying a bunch of veneer. And I dropped $100 on veneer. And like, I have this stack of veneer now, different colors. And all of a sudden I was like, what do I do? This is scary. And I wound up just doing like this marquetry lightsaber for a box for my kid. And it was just simple shapes. It's like when you looked at it, it was like, oh, that's a rectangle. That's a rectangle. That's a rectangle. All pieced together. It's a lightsaber. So you just have to like look at it and try and break down what the elements are, what the core pieces are that you need. And so that's what I've been doing with the roses. I'm cutting out petals right now, and I'm hoping it really comes together when I sand shade everything. So, yeah. What do you got, Mike?
Favorite tool of all time of the week, I probably mentioned this in the past, if not a couple times in the past, is a box joint blade set. So it's a pair of blades, sort of like the outer cutters of a dado blade, but the teeth are really wide. They're 3/16 wide, and they're offset to one side. So when you stack the blades together, you have a 1/4 inch cut. And then when you stack them the other way, you have a 3/8 inch cut. So it's like, well, my dado set already does that. Why do I need this? And so that's why I would say a dado set that's an essential blade that you need for your table saw. And I always mention the box joint blade set because I'm always bringing it with me whenever I teach. I always say, get the dado first. This is really cool. If you want to add to this, to your collection, get this later. This is what it does. And I just use it for so many things where I don't want those little ears that the outer cutters of a dado blade leaves. It's like a perfectly flat groove. So if you're doing splines for a box, if you're doing a groove for a door panel that exits the ends of the stiles, it's super nice and clean. I really like using one blade by itself because it gives you a 3/16 groove, and 3/16 is probably my favorite dimension in woodworking.
Here we go.
It's just like not too skinny. It's not an 1/8 and it's not a 1/4. It's like 3/16. Not only that, it's not even exactly 3/16. It's almost like a skinny 3/16.
I feel like you should write a children's Goldilocks woodworking book on 3/16. It's not too skinny. It's not too thick.
I have a feeling you're on record saying 5/8 is your favorite dimension.
I'm on record saying I don't like 1/4 inch. I don't like 3/4 inch.
You're definitely on record saying 3/4 inch is not.
But 3/16 is awesome. So I like that. And then not only, so I use it for a lot of stuff. It also, you would think without the scoring cutters, it would leave a really ragged trailing edge as you're using it, like to cut a dado or to cut a tenon, but it cuts like the cleanest tenons you've ever seen. I even use it in conjunction with a tenoning jig vertically. And then that wide blade cuts the shoulders as well as the cheek, where normally if you make your tenon cuts vertically, then you have to do a horizontal cut to establish that shoulder. It's like, bam, done. And you think, okay, well, that's really good. Saves me a little bit of time. No, listen, if you are cutting an angled tenon on a board, so you have a wedge in your tenoning jig at that angle, you can't make a cut and then lay that flat and then make the cut. You have to put a wedge on your table saw crosscut sled in order to elevate the piece in order to get a square shoulder. Like, it's impossible because I did that. And like, I wrote an article doing that using this wedge thing. And then I said, oh, I'm using a wider blade. And that way you put a wedge, tape it to your tenoning jig vertically, you put your workpiece next to it, you make a cut, you put a spacer in to cut the second cheek and give your tenon the exact width you want, and the shoulders are done. So this thing is beautiful. Where I was using it more recently was doing a chest that all had internal mitered dividers for all the boxes.
Okay.
And to cut the V groove, I've done the, like the little V groove bit at the router table, but it never leaves that perfect point in there. And so I just take this blade, I kick it over 45 degrees, and it's wide enough to give you a deep enough full V groove, where 1/8" blade would leave that little extra tab. Which
you've done that before.
Yeah, for really, really shallow. But so, yeah, it's a great blade. I would say you don't have to have it, but you really need it. You should get it.
I sold.
Okay. And also I have a Forest, which is expensive, but a lot of companies make this. I think Freud CMT, maybe Bosch, and I think you can get one for like in the $60 to $80 price range for the set. Forest is like, I don't know, 150 up there, but you don't need that. I think it's fairly reasonable. It's like cheaper than a really, really good quality combination blade. You can get box joint set.
I sold our old Unisaw, and I packaged it with a bunch of stuff thinking that somebody starting out might want to buy it. And I sold the dado set that I had.
Aww.
And I sold most of the blades. I kept one that I'm going to get sharpened just to bring in here and hide it so that no one else uses my sharp blade. But I kept my box joint set, and I'm going to have them bore out the center to 20 millimeter to fit the new table saw, because I could see myself using the box joint set more than a dado set.
Oh, so actually you got to make the hole bigger.
Yeah.
Just make sure it's centered.
I would assume they know how to do that.
You'd assume.
Wait, you said I sold our old Unisaw.
It was Mike's saw that I bought from him, and then,
That's why I said, because you know, when you're saying something like, I sold our refrigerator, I think you and Katie, but you said I sold our old Unisaw, and you meant you and Mike. That's so cute.
All right, so this is getting a little weird.
It's very sweet.
Well, it's no longer mine. So now it was mine, and it was Mike's. So now it's ours.
So somebody actually bought a table saw that was Mike Pekovich's, and then it was Ben Strano's.
I have to say, Ben used that as part of his marketing to sell the saw.
Did a little bit.
Yeah. Which was fine.
No, I didn't.
So there's someone out there.
I said the original owner, and I said it's been.
And then you showed a Pekovich Woodwork sticker on the saw.
I did do that.
Yes, you did.
I did do that.
But my point is, somebody now has a saw that you both own.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
And did it go to a good home? Did you sort of investigate?
Well, it's.
You ever try to adopt a cat? Oh my God. The forms you have to fill out, and they will grill you on everything.
I've been.
Was I supposed to do that?
Maybe.
From a shelter.
There's a lineage here.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry. Do you know where it went?
It went to a working shop.
Okay.
It was going to get put into use. It was like the guy was like, I need this saw now. Ours died. We need to get back to work. And he drove 3 hours from Long Island for it.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, Anissa.
I'm making up a new segment.
Oh, great.
I'm done with the smooth moves. Well, I'm probably not done with the smooth moves, but why don't we have a segment that's like my proudest woodworking moment? You can come up with some snappy name for it, but I had a really proud, two really proud woodworking moments in the last couple weeks.
Cool.
Why don't we have that segment?
Well, isn't that like all-time favorite technique of all time? Where it's like, hey, I did something clever.
This is, hey, I did
good. Something clever.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I didn't actually do something. Well, one of them I posted. I'm so excited that I stickered my loaf of banana bread.
Oh, yes.
All these years, I have not I don't like kitchen gadgets all over and having. So the idea of a cooling rack that I only use when I bake cookies or a pie or a cake or something like that, I can't. If there's too much clutter already. And I really needed to cool that banana bread quickly. Why did I never think of just stickering it before? But so fast forward a week from there, I'm still kind of proud of my stickering thing. I'm in a room. I'm not watching this show, but I'm in a room with somebody who's watching this show. And it's called Under the Banner of Heaven, I think.
Okay.
The Spider-Man guy is in there.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just kind of in the room with this show on, kind of paying attention to it, kind of on my phone, kind of like whatever. And I hear one of the characters talking about this book that he was trying to hide from his wife. And he said, it's a red book and it has a woodworking cover on it. And I kind of just I was reading something else and I kind of chuckled because, he put the woodworking cover over the red book that he didn't want the wife to see. So that was my first chuckle. And then I kind of dismissed it. And later on, I just glanced up 10 minutes down the episode. I just glanced up as the guy was pulling the book out in a completely different scene. I don't think but within a split second, I was like, that's Understanding Wood by Bruce Hoadley. I just caught a glimpse of the cover. I am still so proud of myself. It's that's Understanding Wood by Bruce Hoadley. That's my whole segment.
So should we just call this segment check out how dorky Anissa is?
You would have been very proud too. It was like that. There was and I was not even present for the whole thing.
While you were talking, I was trying to guess what cover would that have been. And it's that's the one I came up with because that's a book even woodworkers won't read. It's
but we all have it.
We all have it. Have we all read through it completely? No.
Nope. That's not the point here.
Andrew Hunter, apparently, so Barry asked Andrew Hunter about this one time and was like, because Andrew was going on about how great of a book it is. And everybody says how great, but he said that he reads one page a day. I just don't have that in me.
I mean, there's good stuff in there.
Oh, yeah.
I've looked,
research
I've referenced
purposes.
that.
Yes,
it's sort
absolutely.
of a dictionary. When's the last time you read through the dictionary?
Yeah.
It's been a while. Pre-smartphone, if I'm having to wait in my car for a while and I've got nothing, there's nothing to do, I will read my tire warranties in the glove box. I will read the operator's manual for whatever car I happen to be sitting in.
And you want to call this segment How Dorky is Anissa? Okay.
I've actually witnessed you waiting in your car, but you were writing your book.
Oh, yes. At the Science Museum.
Yeah. All of a sudden I was like, is that Mike sitting in his car alone? And your daughter was volunteering or something.
Yes.
So.
Behind a children's museum by himself. It's okay, I better have a good answer for this. I'm working on my book. Okay. All right. We didn't ask, but that's great.
Oh, shoot.
Yes.
All right. Let's see. Got time for one more question. What do we want it to be?
Boxy box.
Box?
Oh, or the shellac thing.
I don't know. I'd lean box. What do you think, Mike?
Shellac is really, let's do that super, super quick.
Okay.
And then do box.
All right.
Because I want to help this person out.
Okay. All right. This question is from Tom.
Not enough to actually have emailed an answer to this person, but so my apologies.
All right. Shop Talk team. I read Mario Rodriguez's article in issue 234, Make Shellac Your Go-To Finish, about how to mix, prep for, and apply shellac. Still, I can't seem to avoid drips, pooling, and brush marks. When I try to remedy these areas with an abrasive pad or razor blade, per the article, I still end up with streaks or lumps of shellac in the finished product. I've been starting with a freshly mixed 1 pound cut wash coat and then 1.5 pound cut to build a finish. Any ideas about how to improve my process?
Practice. This is a good technique, but it is a really, really highly skilled technique where I think brushing on any finish is about the highest form of finishing in furniture making in terms of difficulty, and it can yield wonderful results. I think if you're not having luck here and you want to try a technique where you are going to have luck, try wiping on the shellac in very, very thin cuts. And I did write an article on that for fine woodworking because I can't brush shellac, but I can wipe on shellac for really successfully, and I use it all the time for small projects. Super, super easy. Give that a read. I think I did a companion video on that as well, where I talked about that. I showed you how to do it. So
I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always, just about always wipe on. The other day, I shellacked the inside of a ukulele, and I went to use a brush to do it, and because I wanted to build fast, and it got out of hand pretty quick.
Yes,
I
it does.
squirted it in there as though it were maybe like, boiled linseed or something like that. That's the ratio.
I've got time to move this around.
And I didn't. And I wound up having to sand some out. And another thing to add to that fix kit, if you will, Tom, would be, go in there with a pad and straight denatured alcohol.
Sure. You can always undo it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which you can't do with varnish. So there is that saving grace of shellac.
Yeah. And just pretend you're French polishing. So oh, no, I'm French polishing. I'm thinning out the shellac. So
I always use the pad too. I'll do like, I'll get the rag and then I'll get an outside cover for it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I love most about shellac is I get those clear squirty bottles with the cap, and then I have two going, so I have a lighter cut for the beginning coats, and then I have the other, and you can see which one is darker, but just they're perfect for just squirting the shellac onto the pad, and then I just wrap up that pad in some plastic and use it the next time, kind of reconstitute it. And I love shellacking. I think it's super easy, very forgiving. But yeah, ditch the brush.
I teach a weekend box making class. In fact, I was just doing that recently at Mark Adams in Indiana. And one of my favorite things about the class is we actually get around to finishing the box. And it's the first time people get a chance to use a shellac finish in a really easy way. And they're like so happy, and it's so beautiful, and everyone nails it. And they're like, oh, I've never gotten a finish to look good. It's like, yes, here you go. So yeah, shellac. Horrible, yet wonderful.
Smells good too, I think.
When I first started using shellac, it always brought back memories of Jaeger.
Oh.
And I would open up the can and just be like, oh, bad decisions.
Bad decisions.
Mad dog. That's all I'm saying.
All right. So this question is from Bob. My question is about box making. I have made a lot of stuff over the years, but I've rarely ventured far away from butt joints, rabbets, and the occasional box hole joining. I hear you all talk frequently about making boxes, which are simple and can be a challenge. So I tried one the other day with rabbet joinery and exposed dowels to dress it slightly. I rabbeted the top to fit and overall was pleased with the outcome. I did learn from you all that sneaking up on a fit is very acceptable woodworking to prevent stressing out over making that one cut fit perfectly with just one cut. It was a joy. Awesome. My question is, what would you suggest a next step to go a little further with the corner joinery and top without jumping in over my head? I think the answer is box joints and a hinged top, but I would love to hear your suggestions.
I'll let you guys chime in on what your suggestions are going to be, but because my suggestion is don't rush to move on from here.
That was mine too.
This is kind of simple construction, but simple is not always easy. And if you were to make this again or set up to make 10 boxes, and through that process, you're going to get really, really good at this. And I think you're going to learn a lot through the repetition by staying with something simple and really diving into it rather than doing an example of this and then jumping onto finger joints or dovetails or what have you. I would don't rush. It's probably a cool little box. You probably can think of a lot of people who might want one or a lot of things to stick in them in your shop. Maybe stay there for a while and get really good at this and then maybe move on after that.
Dang, I like that. You can tweak the design. You can really work on that end.
I mentioned the lightsaber marquetry panel. So I made the panel. I didn't have anything to do with it. I was like, crap, now I got to make a box. And in I think a little over an hour, I made a little rabbited box, but it was the best box I had ever made. Everything was, dare I say, perfectly perfectly sized.
Mm-hmm.
And I've made mitered boxes. I've made octagonal boxes. I've made frame and panel boxes with sliding lids and all sorts of complicated box joint things. But when I sat down and just made a simple rabbited box to the highest precision that I possibly could, and doing everything, like you said, sneaking up on the perfect fit, Bob said, and just doing everything I could to make it perfect. And even the bottom, the plywood bottom, just fit perfectly in there. And it's the best box I've ever made. And it's the simplest construction. And maybe the simplest construction lent itself to being the box I ever made, best box I ever made. But I'll take that rabbited box over a mitered box that is not 100% any day of the week.
Right.
Miters are tough, though.
Where would you go next? Miter box?
Well, I was going to say miter box and mitered box, and he could check out your book, which would be...
Well, yeah.
I'm disappointed that I didn't come up with Mike's answer because it's really, really right on. Or then I was thinking bandsaw box. And he could look at Michael Cullen's stuff and that video workshop that Michael Cullen did, because those boxes are incredible.
Yeah.
And entirely too fun.
And just beautiful, inspirational, different technique than he's probably done at all.
And you could make $1 million and never exhaust the design possibilities. Yeah.
Michael is proof of that, because he'll be teaching the class for the millionth time. And then he's like, stayed after to work on this box I was doing. And it's he just is sitting there carving away and just happy as can be.
And I think he only travels and teaches just the one class. That's it. But I think people just take it multiple times because you're going to go in and make something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the best answer. That's wonderful.
Well, that does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you are watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button. And if you want to leave a 5-star review on iTunes, that really helps us out. It gets the word out to other people and tells the algorithm that it's something they should be recommending. And send in your questions and comments and conversation starters to shoptalk@taunton.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening.
I don't think people say dag nabbit enough.
Who said that? Did I say that?
No, you should have said that.
Okay, dag nabbit.
Dag nabbit.
Dag nabbit.